And then as they typed it in, the very bottom you would hit generate. And what it ends up becoming and looking like is, well, it's not the Martians. Yeah, I don't know if you really want to go there, but it's an option, I guess. Anyway, what it does is it takes the text. My computer's not agreeing today. What it does is it takes the text and it kind of makes it into a kind of a folded piece where it looks like it's something that's, you know, more of a primary source that the kids wrote. So just kind of something to enhance it. All right. Sherry, you. Over to you.
Yolanda,
Yes.
are those all free?
Yes.
One of the things in my district, and in my building in particular, just like most of yours, is literacy is a goal. And in social studies, it's also the nonfiction literacy piece for us. And so finding ways to bring that into the classroom. Now, Rhonda says she teaches U.S. history. I teach a world, basically like a world geography course that is really current issues. And so it constantly changes. My power standards for the class don't even mention names of countries because, or regions of the world, because let's say there's peace in the Middle East, we can move that out in other areas of the world, and nothing changes because we're just still looking up the same things. So with that, my content is forever changing, obviously. As a goal and part of my PPG was that my students would read more. And how do I get them to read more? So one of the things I started doing was I started requiring them to bring in travel narratives. And I use that word real loosely with 8th graders, travel narratives. So we give them the definition of what it is, but the reality is I want them to go out and find a book that involves somebody's experience outside of their own in the United States. It has to be anywhere outside the United States. And so we talk about what a travel narrative is, but I end up with a lot of stories that involve people climbing mountains, sailing around the world, biking around the world, these types of things. And in my mind, I'm okay with that because they're reading. What has happened as a result of doing this is they bring their book to class every day. So anytime we start, sometimes it's my warm-up where they just have to read. Most of the time it works out beautifully when somebody gets done. You know how some kids, well you all know this, how kids get done sooner than others? Then they pick up their book and they read. So I don't have to make up new things for them to do or to keep them going because the book they've chosen is their challenge or enrichment or whatever. What I will tell you is what got me interested in this is the book Take Me With You. And some people who know me in here know that I'm really tightly connected with that book. Have met the author, used the book to teach a class at the Wisconsin Geographic Alliance, bringing literacy into the classroom. And after I started reading that book, I became more interested in travel narratives and wanted to share that with my students. I have about 40 books in my classroom, but I send out a letter at the beginning of the school year, tell their parents to go out and find one. And I make it very clear to the parents that I can't edit what's inside every single book that's a travel narrative out there. And I say it's real world people's real world experiences, and sometimes if I was teaching it, reading it out loud in my classroom, it'd be inappropriate for an 8th grader. But if parents are buying the book and I tell them to read the book with them, look at it, talk through, I've had no issues with it yet. Cross my fingers, it's my 3rd year doing this. So this is a book we just happened upon, met the author, love his story, great story he tells. I saw this book. This guy was a graduate from Waukesha North High School, which is right down the road from me. And what was interesting was, this book is written in 2 versions. There's an adult version and there's an adolescent version, and it's all done with questions. Each chapter is a question, like where do you go to the bathroom, and he talks about all of his experiences. But when you read the beginning of the book, he lost his job, his best friend got married and left him, and his girlfriend dumped him. So now what do you do? So he decides to get on his bike and ride around the world. And one day I called him out of the blue. I don't know, one day in the summer I said, I'm going to call this guy. I called, ended up talking with him on the phone for quite some time. And my bigger question was with people like him is, what do you do after you do this? And then he fell into deep depression. Because you drive your bike around the world and then you come back and now you got to do something. What do you do with it? He is really, really, really involved in schools with teaching kids how to write a book. He's very motivational. If you look him up, you'll find that he's doing some really great things with kids. Walking the Amazon, one of the reasons I like books like that is I try to get the kids to buy narratives that have short stories in them, so you can just sit down and read one. And you can choose like where we are in the world. This one is the case of the Amazon. But there's different ones Up the Amazon Without a Paddle by Doug Lansky. He used to be a columnist writer for newspapers, the one out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, their big paper. And if you read his book, you can tell by the titles he's traveling in different places. So what do I do with them once I have them reading them? Well, I don't do a whole lot as far as grading, because I really want them to read for enjoyment. I read sections out of the books to them. I'll find certain ones, and I spend the first quarter reading sections out loud. This I started doing with Google Classroom. We were required to use Google Classroom in our building. So for me, I would put up a question, and this is how they would respond. So they would just do generic responses like a blog. Simple. I don't want to put a lot of pressure because I don't want them not to read. The minute we start assigning 10,000 things is the minute they want to put the book away. I just want them to read for pleasure. So here you can see a couple of the students are talking about liking where they're reading, and look where they're going. Philippines, India, Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, and they're reading it not from a textbook matter, but then they start to share. Fourth quarter, they're all going to do a minute read. If you follow Kelly Gallagher at all, as far as someone who does anything with literacy, he talks about a minute read. And so each of my students now are reading, and as they read, they look for one piece that they can share with the class, that they can share for a minute. And if you look him up and you look up the minute read, you'll understand what that's about. So that's one thing I'm going to do with it. And I just did with my class, for something in my class, story mapping. Now this story mapping comes from Google Maps. There's another more deep depth story mapping that goes through Esri, is that what it's called? ESRI, Esri? What I did with my students is I'm trying to become a little more personalized, just like all the rest of us. So instead of assigning a list of things to do on a map, and maps to zero in color and all of that stuff, one group of kids will do that. In my district, they call that the legacy model. If you can imagine that our traditional way we teach regularly, in my district is called legacy model now. I'm part of a legacy, I feel good about that. So for those who want a little bit more personalized, I tell them to pick 20 physical features. And what they did this year when we were doing South Asia is they picked using story mapping, and they mapped where they were on story mapping. And when you click on each of the icons, it takes us to that place. They can add an image. They can add video footage. I told them I wanted no more than 30 seconds to a minute on each video footage because I didn't have time to watch all of that. And what they're writing is, they do some work before they do this, is telling me how these physical features affect the life of people there. So I'm thinking next year maybe, this might be what they do with their books. As they travel, in their travel narratives, they might be keeping a story mapping and moving it along with as they travel. Because, if you see, I didn't put it on because I was having problems. This one you can see they have lines, so you can see where he goes first, the people would go for a second or third. This is what I'm finding in my classroom as we're using more and more technology. My students are really good with PowerPoint. They're really super good with Google Slides. What I found they struggle with is anything that they cannot share and all work on by themselves alone. Just like Rhonda and I put this slide for this together. I'm in Port Washington. She was in Madison. Were you in Madison or were you at your parents' house? Yeah, she was in Reedsburg, and we put our PowerPoint slide together. We didn't have to talk to each other at all. We just kind of put our stuff in. And you kind of noticed that when you walked in. We were kind of like, what's next? Who's doing what, right? Well, what I'm watching with my students is I have let go of being the expert on all the technology. I can't. There's just no possible way. But I research pieces of technology or programs, and then I give them a list to choose from, and then they go figure it out. And they use it. Well, it was a whole disaster a few weeks ago in my classroom because they couldn't share, and they didn't know how to work together on a presentation tool that did not involve them being away from each other, not talking to each other, and just putting it in as they so felt. And it was an aha moment for me that, you know what, they're losing a skill. We all know that collaboration is big in our districts right now, and working on Google Slides isn't collaborative in my mind at all when you can sit in your bedroom in your own houses and never talk to someone and do a slide. So with the story mapping, they were working together. What I'm finding is in order to share and be able to work together on a lot of these programs, you have to pay the money. And the kids aren't willing to pay the money, which is okay by me. So with that said, this goes into a lot more layers and deeper, but I think it's a tool that will work real well. Do you want to talk about infographics real quick?
Sure.
I use the infographics, and picto chart was one of the choices I gave my students. I don't know how to use story mapping. I told them to use story mapping. I told my students to use picto charts I don't know how to use it, I have no idea how to use it. They turned in some pretty cool looking things. I tell them to work with each other, I find out other groups who are using it. They can figure this stuff out way quicker than I can. And then it's more diverse, we're not all watching the same things over and over again.
That's a good idea. You give them the idea of choice.
Yeah.
Because yeah, with infographics, like I have a classroom of just all infographics. And in fact, if you look at the cover of the conference book, the cover of the conference book, I believe was an infographic, I think, when they made it. But infographic, again, is just a visual image or a chart diagram used to represent information or used to represent data. A couple of the sites that I've used, like you mentioned with the PictoChart, the other one that I've used is Easly, which is EASEL.ly. And again, it's one where I kind of have gone through with my students and we kind of take a look at how to set them up. But once I kind of give them the rubric and kind of say this is what you have to include in it. You have to have a map, you have to have certain statistics, you have to have summary of your book, certain key vocab, you have to cite your sources. And I turn them loose too, because I can kind of maneuver around. But for the most part, it's
I told my students when they were presenting, I was really listening to their content and how they work together as a team, that if there was a glitch in their technology, that was okay. I think you have to give them permission. It doesn't have to be all bells and whistles, and it doesn't have to go smooth. That as long as the content is good and I can tell that they've worked on it, then I'm okay. Because this is the first time they may have used this site, and to judge them the first time they've used a site that I didn't teach them how to use it, but suggested they use, wouldn't be fair. When I look at their Google Slides, I tend to be harder on that, because I've taught them, I've worked with them, we've gone through ways to use it. So when you're creating your rubrics and the balance piece, kind of keep that in mind.
yeah, so, oops. So this is an example of one. Oops. Did I go back to where it was? There.
That's not, you don't want those.
I don't, just I don't know what that is. Trying to get back here and show it.
No.
Present.
Just go up and present all that
A
stuff.
little big. Yeah, but it doesn't let me scroll down where I want it to scroll. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back here and kind of see if we can, maybe it won't. Well, it's, anyway, and it goes further down. I'm frustrated with this thing today. But this is one from one of the books that the kids had read about the red necklace. And it's much longer. I'm not sure why it's not scrolling down.
It scrolls when it's online. It scrolls when it's online.
It does, because it actually, when we print them out, they're printed out on ledger paper, the longer paper. But when you go in, again, sometimes they have some that are established, kind of set up already on there where kids can use the templates and just tweak and put in the information that they need to. Then they also have the opportunity of being able to just create kind of a clean slate and be able to add their own background information. We take a look, and try to talk about, what's effective, and we take a look, and it's a little hard to read up there, but, you got a black slide, you don't want to use like dark purple writing, and so some of the kids still haven't quite grasped that, but then we did another one on the keeper here, so this one looks more like a newspaper, and then a third one here where they did Lost Boy, Lost Girl. Unfortunately, this is not scrolling now because she had some really good charts and graphs and maps in there. But like we said, it's one which, the kids, you can kind of just pick up and go with it.
Is it kid created stuff or
Yes.
stuff that they pull off of that infographic?
No, this is like after I have my students do like their literature circles I talked about in the beginning, then what the kids do is they take that information and then they create the infographic. So most of these the kids have created, or they use.
But they pull stuff off the internet, so they can pull like images and all
Oh,
that
right,
stuff,
yeah.
they can pull from anywhere. Unlike a couple of the other ones, we had to choose from their menu, no, they can pull from all over. This is one that I'm looking at, seeing if we can get a site license for, so that we can, because it really does some really
This
cool
one's
things.
very sure.
Right, but there's a sharing component that we were
okay.
talking about,
Okay.
it gets a little funkier, so we were looking at some site license, yeah.
Okay, but yeah, the mapping part in here, they also have something where you put in your statistics. So I had the students like, she did a book here in Sudan, and so what she did is found some statistics about the Sudan, might be the literacy rate, might be the death rate, whatever it is, and you can go in